Hi, welcome to Steve's Wood Cave. In this video we're going to be looking at the WoodRat again and a method of cutting comb or finger joints. I've marked out this board. I've machined some boards square and to 148 by 90 by 15 millimeters, so it's 90 millimeters across, and I've divided the fingers or combs into a 5 millimeter shoulder at either end, and then every other line is 16 millimeters. So what we will do is remove the shoulders, and then these the second and fourth coming from the left of the 16 millimeter. So there's a 16 pin, 16 socket, 16 pin, 16 socket, 16 pin, and then 5 millimeter sockets or shoulders on the ends. Once we've cut that, then we can place that in the marker position and use this as a template or a guide to cut the pins, the corresponding pins that will then go into there and form the comb or finger joint. So that's what we're going to do. In this particular method, this is just to show you the relationship. Again, if you've watched my previous video on the marker position versus the cutter position, then you'll have some understanding already. But this is to show you with an actual woodwork joint, and as if you were doing it by hand, where you would mark out where you want to make the cuts and then saw it and chisel out. Well, basically this is the way of doing it on the rat, but it's not the most accurate way, and I would call this an asymmetric method. So in other words, you are, through error, through your eyesight, looking into the rat and trying to get the router bit to line up with these lines, you will end up with slight variations. There's no actual way on the WoodRat to do an accurate 5 millimeter, 16 millimeter, 16 millimeters. But when I show you in the next method, which is a symmetric method, that will become much easier, and you'll be able to produce a box with comb joints that it doesn't matter which way round you place the woods together, they will go, and the sides will be flush. Right. so in this particular asymmetric method, we'll just show you again the relationship between the marker position. And if you haven't already seen my previous video where I show how to mark the registration mark by cutting it on the cutter position, placing it in the marker position and transferring the outline of the router bit onto the front face of the rat, please look at the previous video, and that will show you how to do that. So I'll just assume that you know how to do that already, and here we go. Okay, so what we're doing now is looking inside the where the router bit is on the router on the WoodRat, and you can see my piece of wood moving backwards and forwards, and I'm on the left hand edge of the board, and I'm just lining up the right hand edge of the cutter bit, the router bit, with the pencil line. So this is the first 5 millimeter shoulder. I think that's roughly right, it's roughly on the line there. So we'll set that and cut that. Okay, so we're going to cut the left hand 5 millimeter shoulder. And first of all, we're going to plunge all the way down from the front. Now, as we did a minute ago, I'm going to go touch down on top of the end grain and make the cutter meet up with the left hand pencil mark. So we've got 16 millimeters of wood and then a pencil mark, and we're going to line the left hand side of the cutter up on that pencil mark, and then we'll make another cut. And so now we've got the cutter in front of the wood again, plunge down to full depth. We're going to make the second cut. Now I'm going to move the wood along. Now we've made the second cut. Again, bit on top of the end grain, and this time aligning the right hand side of the bit with the right hand line. Might need a light on that. Just turn the router bit around to get the outermost edge right on the line. It doesn't matter for this cut because we're going to use this piece as a template once we've cut the sockets here. So at this point it really doesn't matter if it's not exactly on the line, but we want it to look roughly right. So remember to do the relief cut at the back first. And without talking through the same again, you can now see that we have a 5mm shoulder on the left and a 16mm socket to the right of it. I'm not going to talk it through again, but you repeat this for the next socket and the end shoulder. Now the second large socket's been done, and I'm left with the 5mm shoulder to cut. So just a point to remember that you rotate the router bit to get the outermost part of the diameter in line with the 5mm line, but the left hand side of the bit obviously. Again, relief cut from the back first. So that's what I've cut. Basically you can see the pins, 5mm shoulders and roughly 16mm sockets. So now what we do is we put this in the marker position. So keeping the face that was facing you when this was in the cutter position. I know this was showing out because I had the dimensions of the board written on it, and the knot is on the left. So we put that now. Actually, we can move this along. We can now put this again top of the pin flush with the body of the WoodRat. And now we're going to use this as a template to cut the sockets in another piece of wood like this. So what we're going to do now is we're going to line up the right hand pin with the pencil mark, and you can see that the router bit is 10mm, so it's much narrower than this right hand pin. So what we're going to do is just make a cut right through the middle, not of this, but the piece that's going to be in the cutter position, because this is the template. Remember, this has got to fit into a socket. So what we're using these pins now to cut the socket in the other board. So here's my next piece of wood, and I'm going to put that in the cutter position now. So I've positioned the camera now so that you can see that I've left this first cut board in the marker position. It's lined up with the pencil marks here, and it's going to cut through the middle of this pin. Well, not of the pin in the marker position, but of the board over here, because we're trying to create a socket for that pin to fit into. So again, relief cut from the back, full depth of cut. So now we've cut through the middle of this, we can now cut the two extremes. First of all, I'll line up the pencil with the outside edge. I didn't quite get the full 5mm shoulder on this right hand side, but it doesn't matter for this exercise. What we want to do is make sure that the whole pencil line width is covered by this last piece of wood on the end here. If I'm exaggerating here, but say this face of this pin is too far to the left of this pencil line, then the joint is going to be too slack. And exaggerated again, if this end face of this was too far to the right of this right hand pencil mark, joint will be too tight. So we would just want to cover the pencil line, this right hand side, just cover it, because remember these two pencil lines on the top of the rat body represent the cutter. So in order for this to fit, I'd say that is just covering that pencil line. And now I'm going to make that cut through on the cutter position. So here we go, once again relief cut from the back and then cut through from the front. And you should be able to see just there is a big hole and roughly a 5mm pin remaining, and that 5mm pin will fit on the end of the other piece. But this slot isn't 16mm wide, or the width of this pin that's in the marker position. So we now need to go back to the marker position and line up the left hand edge of that right hand pin. So now I'm going to wind so that this right hand pin, the left hand face or edge, just covers this pencil line, the left hand pencil line. I think it's about there. I'm now going to repeat the cut, and that should create the socket for this right hand pin. I'll then repeat the process for the middle pin on this board here and the left hand pin. So I've now moved this central pin that's in the marker position, and I've centralised the router bit to come through the middle of it again. So now the moment of truth, we take the board out of the cutter position, pull all the whiskers off. This is a bit of pine, so it's quite fluffy. I should have put a side on here, so we'll just write side A on each of those pieces so we know which way round they were. Oops. Okay, that's tight, but I've worked out which way around it was supposed to go. I don't think you can get much better than that. And that is so side A, because it has to go on the inside. Because when this was in the marker position, this right hand pin was cutting the socket that was on the right hand side in the cutter position. So that's the way round it goes. Okay, so hopefully you can see now a bit closer. It's very, very tight fit. It wasn't, I mean, I had to push it in with a bit of force, but again, you can adjust all these sides are perfectly lined up. Well, maybe a tiny bit to remove with a hand plane or sanding. There's a slight crack there, but maybe the glue would fill that. I'd be perfectly happy with that if I'd done that by hand. That finger joint would be awesome. So that's the first method of comb joints. In the next section we'll talk about how to make this perfectly symmetrical, because as you can see this pin is thinner than the one on the right, basically because I didn't quite line the bit up perfectly. But I can show you how to make them perfectly symmetrical and repeatable So this is just to show you the first step in using the marker position on the left and the cutter position on the right. Pretty nifty. Okay, so now we're going to look at method B, which is the symmetric cut. And as you might have seen when you watched the first part with boards A, we marked up the pins and sockets, and we ended up with an asymmetric layout. So basically the outer pins were not quite the same size. Okay, there was a bit of an error in me aligning the router bit in the exact place on the line that I'd marked. I kind of done it on purpose because I wanted to demonstrate that you have human error, so you can make mistakes when you're lining up the router bit with the marks that you've made on the wood. So with this method B, I'm going to show you how to do this now. What I've done is coloured in the ends, we've marked it up and coloured in the alternate ends, so the shoulders and then the two inner sockets. And what we're going to do first, what we can do with this method is we can put the board in any way you like, and each and every board will come out and fit whichever way around you put it. So that's one of the major advantages of this method. Also, you don't have to keep the same face. If you remember in the other method, we had to remember which face we had put in and which way around it was and how it went together. With this method, we can put it in any way you like and it will all come out exactly the same. So the point was that you don't need to actually measure this. You can just artistically or visually draw lines across here any way you like, in any random pattern. And this is one of the other advantages of the WoodRat, that with a dovetail template, which can probably do comb joints, you are stuck with the spacings usually, as far as I'm aware. With this, you can put the router bit wherever you want. I mean, it's endless basically. So you can generate all sorts of bizarre joints and patterns to make it a little bit more visually pleasing. So what we're going to do is we're going to stick this marked B, same size as the piece we cut earlier. We're going to stick this in the marking position here. Just drop it down a few millimeters. You don't have to have it exactly flush this time. Now all we're doing is we're lining up these shaded regions with the router bit here, and we'll take an uncut board, also got B labelled on it on this side. I'm going to put that in the cutter position, move that one out of the way. So what I've done is I've wound this marked up board and lined up this waist side for this shoulder with the right hand pencil line, which represents the right hand side of the router bit. And now what we're going to do is cut through each shoulder, and I'll show you how just now. What we're going to do again is to plunge to full depth. By the way, when I did part A of this video, I forgot to attach the dust extractor, so made a bit of a mess. You might have noticed it in the first part of the video. Right, so we've gone to full depth. I've not touched the router since I did part A of the video with the asymmetric. So we'll just show you the process now. I'm going to cut through top left hand shoulder. So what I'm going to do now is I've left that, don't touch the handle, take this out of here and flip it over. This So now the cut shoulder is down at the bottom. So notice now we're now on the other side facing towards us. And we're going to make the same cut again. And now, again without touching the handle, we're going to flip it around this way. So now we've got the B side back. We'll make sure it's square on the underside of the router base or base plate. Same cut again. Finally, head over heels to cut the final uncut shoulder. Again, I've not touched the handle. So when we take it out, it's got 4 shoulders exactly the same. Now it's purely symmetrical. So now we've cut the 4 shoulders, we're going to move this along to align the cutter with this next gap. And I'm just looking at the left hand edge of this pencil mark here against the left hand edge of this coloured in 16, and to be honest it doesn't really matter, because whether we're a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right of this marked line, okay, it's going to make a difference to your end product, but it depends how fussy you are really. At the end of the day, with this method everything's going to come out symmetrical, as you'll see at the end. So there we go, that's set now, so we can now do the same set of rotations of the board in the cutter position. Okay, so I put the board back in, you can see the cut shoulder there, there, there and there. I'm going to do the same procedure as I did for the shoulders, but this time I'm going to do it all in one go. Now you can see the 4 inner sockets, but these are only 10mm wide because of the router bit, so it's back to the marker position to move it along again. So as you can see, that's where we've just cut on the left hand side, so now we move it along so that we line the right hand pencil line up with the right hand pencil line. We'll do the same again, flip it around 4 times. So we've made the adjustment on the marker position, and now we should be able to cut through again, head over heels, flipping it around, making sure we cut all 4. Okay, so now you can see we have 4 evenly spaced sockets. All 4 shoulders are done and the inner sockets are done. And all we've done is mark up from the left hand socket and the left hand inner socket on our board that's in the marker position. So now what we do is take this board that we've just made, this symmetrical board B, and take this one out of the marker position. Place this one, doesn't matter which way around you put it in here now. We can now use this board to cut this uncut board. Put that in the cutter position. And now what we need to do is to cut sockets in the board in the cutter position by aligning the pins in this board in the marker position up with the router bit. So again, you know that these pins are roughly 16mm. Okay, turns out they're not equal, but it doesn't matter. These are 16 on the outside and the one in the middle is 15. But because we've got a 10mm cutter, we can actually, if you remember, we need to align this left-hand pencil line with the outside edge of this one. We just want to cover that pencil line. Because that's 16mm, that's 10mm. We can do this in 2 cuts for this particular socket. So now if we rotate this around, again, flip it around like a spinning top first. So that's cut our 4 initial slots that meet up with this. So this is just to show where I'd left this pin relative to this left hand pencil mark of the router bit, and now I'm going to move it. So the right hand edge now just covers this right hand pencil mark. I think that's about right. And now we can cut the other part of the socket. So again, I'm going to cut through, relief cut at the back for each of the cuts that will widen this slot. Again, cartwheel it over or flip it around to cut each of the 4 slots. So now we have 4 pins on each corner, and now we need to remove a socket at the centre corresponding to the one in the marking position. So now we're going to move across to here and align the left hand pencil mark with the left hand face of the centre pin, just covering the pencil line. So. Okay, so now we're going to cut the left hand side of the middle socket. Now, because the centre pin is 15mm, we're going to have to not, we can only top and tail it to cut this side. So this middle pin, for some strange reason, has come out slightly smaller than these outer ones, so we can't do what we did before. So now we've just got to cover that right hand pencil mark with this face. So now just going to pull through, top and tail it. Moment of truth. Ooh. Not bad. Goes that way. Flip it around that way. Yep. So that's the symmetry. And if I turn it around that way, it should also fit. It does. There's a slight crack here. Turn it around that way now. Ooh. Alright, okay. It's the same when you try things on camera. Alright, so that's that. Seems to go around that way. If I now rotate around this way, try this board again. Yep. Flip it over. Yep. Head over heel. Yep. And flip. Yeah. So yeah, it's gone in any which way. There is a slight problem there with a slight gap. Obviously made a mistake with I was lining it up, but it's not bad, and I don't think I'd be too worried about that. I'd fill that with shavings and glue. That'd be fine. So yeah, there you go. That's the symmetrical comb joint. Obviously, if you make 2 of these and 2 of these, you can then make a box, 2 sides and 2 ends. And you can do that by putting 2 uncut boards. You can tape them with parcel tape, that thin, wide parcel tape, if you prefer. Or you might be able to just comb them in without the tape, like that, depending on the thickness of your boards and depending on what your fence is here. So yeah, you can pretty much make a box. So that's the method B symmetrical comb joint, and compared to the asymmetric one, obviously with this one I can't take that board out and rotate it around the other way because there's a slight difference with the width of the pins on the end. I think I showed that earlier, so I won't repeat that now, but that's the disadvantage of that method. So I recommend you use method B, which is the symmetrical one, and you just draw some lines on the end of your board and use that as your guide, if you like, and then you can batch cut them. Even if you can't cut them 2 at a time or 3 at a time, you can put them in, do 1 at a time and just go through the steps before you move it. You can, with the symmetrical method, obviously you can put the board in any which way around. It doesn't matter, you haven't got to remember which is the front face and then move it over here. So it's much easier. So there you go, that's the comb joint. Thanks for watching, hope you found it useful, and if you've got any comments or you want to click on the like or subscribe, that'd be great. Thank you very much, and see you next time. Thank you, take care.